57 years old, so I'm a learned technology guy. So I didn't grow up with it, so I have to make sure I have this right. So give me a heads up every now and then if I'm making some errors here. Okay, there we go. Okay, you guys can see that. That's good, right? Yep. Okay, get a thumbs
Yeah.
up from Coach Skinner. There we go. Good. All right, so guys, I work for Mad Dog Lacrosse. I'm the national director of player development. I also still coach a high school team. I live in California now, as Blake alluded to, Coach Skinner alluded to. I lived in New York for most of my life. I coached at a few high schools on Long Island. For the most part, Farmingdale High School was my main place. I spent most of my career. I also taught there. And I a couple years ago retired from that role, and on a whim, not on a whim, but on a very organized whim, moved to California to work for Mad Dog full time. And I've continued to coach high school across the Carlsbad High School. And a topic that I think is it's talked about at conventions and clinics some, but I think it could be talked about more as practice planning and how practice planning can be used, how you can apply it, some ideas in applying it. I really love the topic. It's not something that I drew some things in a hat and drew up practice planning. It's something that I'm really trying to talk about more. I'm pretty committed to giving back to the game. Game's given me a lot in my life. It's given me the ability to do it full time, right? I work full time. I'm like a college coach, but I don't have to recruit necessarily, right? So, I'm in a pretty good spot where I live in California, working for Mad Dog, and now still coaching in high school. So, as I get to my presentation, just like to acknowledge the fact that I do work for Mad Dog for a great company with Tommy Dura and Aiden Herman got me to come work for them full time. Their vision of what club lacrosse and lacrosse can be and how I could give back to the game. Like doing these kind of presentations, I do a bunch of these, and I feel very strongly about doing it. I think you should always try to give back if you like something and you care about it. Not only should you be learning about it, but you should be trying to give back to it for all that's given to me. I've worked at some great high schools. I work with a lot of great coaches. Growing up on Long Island and coaching on Long Island, I had the ability to, within a short drive to Hofstra University when John Danowski was there and learn from him. Not only was I lucky enough to coach his son, his Matt, in high school, but I spent a lot of time with Coach Danowski when he was coaching at Hofstra and now with Duke. And, just living on Long Island, you're surrounded by great coaches left and right at Farmingdale. Bob Horath in U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Fame, Dennis Bonner, Coach Spring Harbor. So I was able at a young age to learn how to coach. What I think is there's a lot of right ways, but not avoid a lot of pitfalls and avoid a lot of mistakes and do things, I guess, which you would say the right way. And I'm here to give back to people and help people maybe avoid some of those pitfalls that you may be in a non-traditional area and it's more difficult to pick up and get information from. And that's why I do these. I love doing these because I can give back and hopefully get you some ideas in your head. But if you have to practice on Monday, you could go to practice and maybe try to apply something and get something out of it right away. And most importantly, everything I have, I've developed very little, but I've begged, borrowed, and stole from so many people. And I was at Coach Skinner's practice the other day. I saw two things I really loved that I've already written down in my notebook and taken back with me to California, but we're going to start implement right away. So whenever you have an opportunity to be around people who try to learn something, and I'd like to thank you for having me here today, And once again, why am I talking about practice planning? Pretty simple. In 2025, I planned over 250 practices. Seems like a pretty large number, right? There's 365 days in a year. That's basically what I do at Mad Dog. One of my big roles there is practice planning for different regions in the country, different age groups. So I plan practices for high school players, middle school players, down to kids that are just learning and starting the game, who know how to stick in their hand. I personally ran well over, it has to be over 100 practices. I don't really exactly count, but my high school team, we ran over 60 practices in 2025. So it's, excuse me, well over 100. And personally, I do this for a living now. I'm a person, I try to learn a lot about very few things. I don't know how to fix cars. I don't know how to lay tile in my bathroom and things like that, but the things like I want to know about, I learn a lot about. I spend a lot of time thinking and studying and trying to learn the best ways. And I think that when you learn to do things a certain way, there's a lot to borrow from other sports. I borrowed a lot from soccer. Soccer is like a sport that's played in the entire world, right? There's nothing more important in Brazil than winning the World Cup. If you think about it that way, right? There's nothing more important in Spain than winning the World Cup. So they put a lot of emphasis, time, and money into creating the best soccer players they can in countries all over the world. There's a lot to steal from that and borrow and see what they do and learn from it, because soccer's been going on for a very, very long time, you know. The other reason why I want to talk about this is, you know, how do you really implement this stuff? People talk about things right now on social media. There's a tremendous amount you can learn if you really put your mind to lacrosse between Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. There's a lot you can learn. But then again, when you have all this stuff, right? I have notebooks upon notebooks. My wife rolls her eyes when she looks at how much stuff I have, and and when we move, how much I've gathered, right? But how do you implement it? How is there real world application to do these things that you're learning about? I'm going to hear talk about some of that today. You know, another part of this topic is there's a really big push in certain sports about the ideas of free play, letting kids just kind of figure it out on their own versus training kids and creating a training environment. I think you can actually do both really, really well. I will tell you, my example is I love music. And I've learned to try to play the guitar several times over the past few years. I have short kind of chubby fingers. I don't work on the guitar as well. And I've worked on my own a whole bunch, but I'm not Eddie Van Halen yet, you know? So I think that while it's great to have kids in their backyard free playing and doing really, really good things and learning on their own, there needs to be a direction also given to them, because some kids will find it naturally able to figure things out and they're very in tune. And then there are others who could become very good at it, but they need more direction. Like I certainly need about playing the guitar, right? So that's my analogy to it. Another thing is the training versus practicing philosophy, right? Like I found when I was working in club lacrosse, in the beginnings of club lacrosse on Long Island, sometimes we would go to a practice and some of the guys there would be like, all right, we'll do some stick work, we'll do some fast breaks, and we'll scrimmage. And they called that a practice. And while it was a practice and we were definitely occupying the players' time, it wasn't training them, in my mind, to get better, right? So there's a difference between training for improvement and practicing. And I think you have to understand there's a divergence there of things. And I focus on training. And while we do call it practice, it's always constantly trying to get players better, either understanding the game, mental focus, physical, skills, whatever you want to describe it as. We're always trying to get better. It's always a training. Training is the philosophy rather than just, I don't really know what practicing actually, I use practice planning, but I'm not sure what the word practicing actually means in terms of like training compared to each other. I guess there's a lot, if we could talk about that for hours, right? One of my big things that Lou Boyan, who runs our New Jersey Mad Dog program, says, there's a saying that I've kind of borrowed. We want to leave them smiling and sweaty. When we're done training a group of kids, we want them to be sweaty and they worked really hard, but they want to be like, hey, it might be very challenging. It might not be easy, but they're like, man, I love this game. I love doing this. This is fun. You know what I mean? And getting better and improvement should be fun. It should be hard sometimes. And you might walk away and go, wow, that drill was really hard. I threw the ball away with my left hand 15 times in that drill. It was really hard. That's okay. But they should enjoy the process of improvement, right? And enjoy the game. It's a great game to play. The beauty of lacrosse is I coached high school football for 25 years. You never play football except on game day. You practice the components of the game, but game day is when you get to play football, right? And that's the beauty of it, is on game day, nothing like it. But in lacrosse, you can play lacrosse every practice. Every time you train, you can play lacrosse. It's a cool game to get better at. And lastly, I love when I bring kids in. I travel over the country and train kids for not only Mad Dog and other stuff, other events, but I love when kids get in the huddle and they look at me, they're like, all right, guys, and they're like, Coach, it's over? Yeah, we just did an hour and a half. It felt like 10 minutes, right? It means they had a great experience. And I think a lot of that is how you structure what you're doing. How you structure how you're doing what you're doing is going to have a massive impact on leaving them smiling and sweaty and them wanting to do more and be like, wow, we just did an hour and a half. We just did 2 hours and it's over and they have to go home and they can't wait to come back, right? They can't wait to do it again. And now you have them on the hook, right? And now you have kids who want to get better at the game and want to be, they'll go in their backyard now and they're going to start mimicking things you did because they liked it so much, you know? So what I did was to move forward. I know this is kind of small. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. I guess go to slideshow, right? If I go to slideshow, a little bigger. Yep, it's a little bit bigger now.
Yep.
So I started looking at practice planning before I worked at Mad Dog when I was still coaching my high school program. Just to give you a little context, in New York, we're able to train our teams outside the season, hands on. There are the rules about contact. Some states have very significant contact rules out of season. I actually think those are very restrictive rules that allow. I think they're kind of productive in 2026, but a lot of states do have them. We didn't really necessarily have that as much in New York, so we spent a lot of time with our players outside the season, most specifically in the winter, in the months before the season, leading up to the start of the season. And we found at my high school program that we spent about 50 hours of training time leading up to the season, and we were able to take players and create massive improvement from our players right before the season started, and we got so much better. And we kind of gave up on the summer a little bit because football had preseason, and kids were doing tournaments, playing for their club teams, and practicing other sports. But we took the winter as our time, and we started really diving into how are we doing in these 2 hours? Like, what are we doing in this training? How are we getting guys better? And this is where this practice planning or training planning has come to my mind. And I've kind of reinvented how I look at periods in training. I've given them kind of slightly different names. I'm not going to go through this very specifically now, but and obviously, if you want a little bit more of this, I don't mind sharing this with anybody. Like I said, part of my goal is to get people to try to see things a different way and learn. So I have a whole bunch of other names of periods that you're not necessarily going to do all of these in every training, but this is what your thought process is when you're trying to figure out what am I doing, what drills am I doing, and how am I fitting them into the training plan. You have creativity, engagement, dynamic, which is just really a stretch period, proficiency, ignition, mastery, integration, innovation, and cohesion. And I've come to those names. So I think they actually apply very specifically to what we're trying to accomplish in a training period or a practice or over a bigger period, over a block training plan over a longer period of time. I might come back to this in a few minutes, but I'm going to kind of move on a little bit. Let's see here. Can I move forward here? There it is. When you're trying to figure out training or planning, the factor that I really like to look at that influence when I try to, when a coach from Illinois says to us, "Hey, I got this going on," or even my high school program specifically, or a youth group, I work very closely with the Carlsbad Youth Lacrosse group in California. They've done a tremendous job. They have literally hundreds of kids playing in Carlsbad, California, and I help them with their practice planning. These are the things that I look at when I try to create a practice plan. A training plan is when in the calendar are we? Are we in the fall where we're doing a fall practice that could be months away from a season? Are we in season? Are we in the summer? And the calendar could also affect obviously what the weather conditions are, right? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it the morning and it's going to be cold, but it's going to get warmer? I actually think of that stuff in terms of what you're doing with players, right? In my high school program in New York, it was cold at the beginning of the season. There's teaching that had to get done. So obviously, what's the environment going to be when you're teaching guys a man up play when it's 37 degrees? You better teach it fast, and you better find ways to teach it effectively. Maybe you teach it indoors before you go out. Maybe you bring an iPad out and show them a quick clip because it's cold. You want to keep them moving. The location, where is training going to be held? What are kids going to be like when they get out of their parents' car to come to train? Do they drive for an hour to train? What's the field size? How much space do we have to work with? Are we indoors? Are we outdoors? Do we have a full field, a half field? I have drills that you can do in any size space, right? A lot of stick work does not need a real field to work off of. It can work off a really small area, and it could be very effective. And sometimes people get caught up in being on a field with the rectangle with the lines and stuff, And I think the more I train, the more you just get in tune with. You can train anywhere as long as you have space and you understand before you get there what you're working with. Or even if I got there and I got changed and it happened to be a field change, we go someplace different and get a lot done. How long is the practice going to be? An hour and a half, 2 hours. Sometimes we have kids travel very far to train with us at Mad Dog at certain trainings, and it may be a 3-hour training with a 15 to 20-minute break in the middle to give the kids time to hang out with their friends and eat some snacks and take a little break and then finish up. I like to say the typical practice time, I think, for my club operation, about an hour and a half. My high school program, I never liked practicing more than 2 hours if I could help it. If I know Coach Skinner probably agrees that 2 hours is probably the maximum time you could go and be effective to get kids' attention span. As coaches, we always have that, right before a game, a big game practice, we always want to make sure we cover everything right. And you're kind of like, robbing time to try to get things done. But I think 2 hours is by far the maximum you could do. The younger the players are, if you plan practice correctly, training correctly, an hour is tremendously effective if you plan it correctly. I think that's my point here is that like going into the training, if you have a good plan, you can get a lot done more than you think you can get done if you just show up, get out of a car, and don't have a plan. How many coaches do you have? Is it me, myself, and I against 20 kids? Are there three coaches? Can we subdivide? Can we break up in different areas? What can we do? How many players are there? How old are the players? What is their ability level? Coach, you're doing the training with 20, 33s, and this is their first season. Well, that's going to look a little bit different than coaching 27s who are eight of them have committed to Division One schools. I think the training is going to be a little bit different, right? Also, our expectations as coaches have to change, and how we're expecting things to go has to change. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. And lastly, availability of implements. Like, what do we have at the field? How many goals do we have? I like to have extra goals. I'm a high school program. We would have 3, 4, 5 goals laying around. I went to Coach Skinner's practice the other day. There were a whole bunch of goals around. There were mini goals or box goals they used. They used tennis balls. They used cones. There were football dummies around. They probably could have used in some drills that they wanted to. So what kind of implements do you have? Do I have crease? Do I have creases? Is the field lined correctly? If not, do I bring creases? Do I use creases, those portable creases for other things? So all these things are factors in terms of how you're going to design the training. Basically, I'm just going to show you real quick. This is also another look at how I would also, is the practice sheet. I do believe when you write a practice sheet, have some kind of sheet to work off of. In terms of like writing down what you're doing and how you're doing it. Just an example, this is kind of one that I've used a lot. I'm actually morphing a little bit something different. I was actually working on it last night a little bit, something a little bit different. But you see there's spaces here for the teams, dates, practice number, field size, locations, who the coaches are, what are our goals of the practice? What are we trying to accomplish that day? Coach Skinner just did a man-up, man-down presentation. Maybe we're doing a man-up, man-down day. So now that's going to affect everything we do. It might be designed to work more towards gaining proficiency at extra man offense and man-down defense. Maybe as Coach Louie did his first presentation, great presentation, by the way, the first one on offense. Maybe we're installing a 1-3-2 today. So where are we fitting that into our training plan? I look at it, and this is obviously a lot of flexibility. You can see that how I would start our sessions off. Like, so people talk about free play, right? I think if before you even start a practice, if you create a philosophy of the 15 minutes before practice, throw out tennis balls, throw out some small goals if you have them, and you just, let kids know they can come early and just put a helmet on. Gloves and not gloves, helmets and gloves, and just go out there and shoot on the mini goals and play little games with each other. You'd be surprised if kids know that's what's happening the 50 minutes before you start, and you're not even coaching it. You could talk to parents, you could set the field up, you could do whatever, but the kids are on their own having fun for 50 minutes. How much kids will be pushing their parents to get there earlier, right? We always got the kids running out of a car right before we start in club and youth lacrosse. All of a sudden, the kids know that they have 50 minutes to just play with their friends and have fun. They'll want to get there earlier. Now, all of a sudden, you're stealing time, right? You're taking your hour and a half practice, and kids are playing around for 10 more minutes on their own. So you are incorporating some free play right into your practice plan. I think that's really pretty cool, having those goals out and letting kids just come in and mess around for a while and have fun with their friends and create some rules and play on their own and before you get started. I like to have a period every practice I like to call engagement. I used to have a thought that when practice started, I always wanted to do a drill I used to call an energy drill, something that got the kids excited to be there, something that was competitive, high intensity, a lot of reps in a short period of time, like a 3-on-2 ground ball type of a drill, something like that. I'm having a 4-on-3 type of a drill. Got kids excited to be there, got them hyped up, and you made teams, you kept score, right, things like that. But I've now come to the thought process that that energy period, which I now call ignition, that's a physical thing that happens, right? There is a mental component to understanding the drill and thinking your way through a drill. But lacrosse is such a mental game. We're always talking about lacrosse IQ and how we're going to use that to be effective and how we're going to get kids to learn lacrosse IQ and be more involved. Well, now I want to engage their brains right away. I can always engage them physically. Engaging players physically at a training or a practice is actually kind of easy, right? But the hardest part is, how do I engage them mentally? How do I get them into that mental engagement? So now what I do is I have a bunch of drills that I do, but I have really almost no physical contact. They're all basically what you would call stick work drills. Some people in soccer might call them like rondos, in the typical soccer term. A lot of like keep away type drills that have a variety of rules that involve players touching the ball, a lot of touches, but also a thought process of what they're doing and why they're doing it, when they're doing it, but I think turns their brains on. And also there's always a communication aspect in my engagement drills and gets them to like have to talk to each other, right? I know Coach Skinner probably would agree, and Coach Deanna would agree that getting kids to talk on the field is complicated, right? It's nothing new. People say, oh, kids have phones, they don't want to communicate anymore. Trust me, when I was in 5th grade, or in 11th grade at Farmington High School in 1985, nobody wanted to talk either. And I can remember getting yelled at for not communicating on certain things in the game and not talking. And of course, old school way, we ran. You're not going to communicate? Put them on the end line. We'll get you to communicate, Well, now I can't talk. I'm gasping for air. But, the concept was, force us to communicate. I think now you can get guys to communicate through drills and certain things that create communication, that are very useful and very engaging. And I like to do these right away. So not only do we get the guys, they think what just happened. They were creative. They would just mess around on a bunch of goals, shooting tennis balls, doing whatever. You blow the whistle, you bring them in. Hey, guys, we've got 8-6-4 drill right now. We haven't stretched. You've done nothing else. And we get a little mental engagement with them right away. Then we do a brief stretch. I think stretching at a lot of age groups is a little overdone. I used to work with a coach many years ago in football. He was an older gentleman at the time, probably closing in on the age I am now. He used to say, Michael, all the stretching, the kids walk around the hallway all day long. What do we got to stretch for? They've been stretched out all day. They went to phys ed. They did stuff, I think, and he wasn't really too far off. I think sometimes we spend a little bit too much time in things like dynamic and stretching, things like that nature, where we've just done an engagement drill. We got a lot of touches. We got them moving a little bit. We bang out a quick dynamic stretch. And then we get right into, I call proficiency, like a stick work component drill, something where you're working on, once again, more touches again, depending how you're going to arrange that stick work. And then I dive right into what I would call an energy or an ignition type drill. Usually after the ignition drill, I put time frames on there, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I come from a football background as well. So to me, 15 minutes is actually 3 blocks of 5. Not just 15 minutes, I subdivide the time. So I might want to do, in 15 minutes, we might be able to do two ignition drills, depending if they play into each other. Usually after ignition now, we've got some stick work in. We got guys going a little bit. We got them fired up. We had a winner and a loser. Maybe the losing team bull hunted. Maybe the winning team made fun of them while they bull hunted. Maybe somebody ran 2 sprints for losing the game. And now I think you give them a little quick water right there. I think in an hour and a half training, which is listed on the screen is an hour and a half, unless you're in a really super hot environment, Texas in the summer could be pretty hot, I would imagine. California could be the same way at certain times in the year. I try to give as little set water as possible. I know in club when kids are younger, their water is all by their bags. I was at Coach Skinner's practice the other day. He really didn't give much of a set water break. He kind of worked his way through it. I loved it. Water bottles were out. He had a couple of injured guys for keeping the water bottles filled. And so he maximized his practice time. I also call it a buffer period because maybe during that 5 minutes, to me, the coaches are never off. I know in a water break, coaches group up and they talk about the NFL game yesterday or a great restaurant they ate at or who's not at practice. You got no time for that. We have an hour and a half. So that buffer water period, we're going to use that break to do stuff to set the field for whatever we're doing next to be organized. And then we fill into a couple other periods, mastery, integration. I'll talk a bit more about those things, but you kind of see how I arrange practice in those blocks, in those block times. And I do think, at the older levels, you can get down to 8-minute blocks, 7-minute blocks, 3 blocks of 5, and keep changing the drills up. I think the younger the kids are, the more you have to stay on something a little bit longer just to make sure they're organized in it and they're doing it correctly. I know there's a lot of debate about that. My experience is that if you spend a little bit more time and try to get kids to understand it, pretty important. Things of that nature. See if I can move on here a little bit. There we go. These are some things I think are also really important when you're running a practice. I already talked about win the pre-practice period, like be creative, right? Try to get kids to be there early. Why am I getting there early? Why am I pushing my mom to get me out of the house, get me there early? Because it's going to be fun. Because lacrosse is fun and we're going to have a good time. We're going to hang out. And then, you can tell kids, listen, I used to tell my high school team, stretch is your time. During stretch, if you guys want to talk about girlfriends or you want to talk about school or you want to make fun of each other, stretch is your time. When stretch is over, we're inside that rectangle. Now you're on the team time and the coach's time. So get that out of your system during the stretch. Maybe during the pre-practice creativity period, the kids are having a great time. They're enjoying being there. They talk a whole bunch. They haven't seen each other in a few days. They get that out of the system. And then you have them really dialed in for the rest of the time you have them. I talked about winning the water break. The water break doesn't have to be a water break for coaches. It's what are we doing next? During the water break, maybe you assigning these guys, when I call your name out, you're switching pennies right now. So we're winning that water break. We're not going to, I see coaches bring kids in and then divide the teams up. Well, you just were on the sidelines for 5 minutes. Kids were drinking for 30 seconds and they were talking or looking at their phone for the other 3.5. You could have called out 12 names and divide them up during that water break, right? And saved a little bit of time. Me, I'm a lot about saving time because we have an hour and a half. We're not taking an hour and a half and using 20 minutes for stretch, for organization. We want to train for an hour and a half, right? I think you should try to find your core dozen. I use dozen. I think dozen's a pretty good number. I think rather than I have a bank of literally hundreds of drills, but in my high school season or in a club team I'm working with, I'm going to find a small number of drills that we're going to stick with for a long period of time. And we're going to do them. We're going to, as I show you in a few minutes, we're going to increase how we do the drills and increase the complexity of the drills rather than just teaching more and more drills. I think getting kids in tune, how the drill works, and then being able to do it, finding drills that works for your group and what you think you need is more important than just having more. I really do believe in that because kids get proficient at something and the drill is getting a proven outcome that you want. Stick with that, but just make the drill more complicated. I'm going to show you that in a minute. Combining of drills. Well, you have an hour and a half, right? Or 2 hours. An hour and a half really is a pretty good time, or even an hour. Maybe I can run one drill into the next drill without really having to change things too much, without having to move goals or fly cones around or change teams. So I have a bunch of drills that one plays into the next, right? One example of this, I do a lot of like 3 and 4 man stick work. So we'll get into groups of 3 or 4 and we'll do 3 or 4 different drills, one after the other, that work really well with 3 or 4 players. An example could be like a 3 or 4 man shuttle into a 3 or 4 man circle drill into a 3 or 4 man figure 8 drill. So that way we're not just resetting the drill every 5 minutes, right? We're just working one thing to the next. You know what I mean? I saw Coach Skinner's practice the other day. He did a little staggered full field passing, which I really thought was cool. And my mind was constantly thinking about, well, after I do 2 reps of this, what can I do this with it? How can I do this with it? Because I'm a combining guy trying to save time and work one set of drills into another. To be productive and work off time. I think if you start looking at practice like that, you can find drills to work into the other. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to quickly show you that a little bit. I like to talk about making stick work great again. We have this thing going on now where I can tell you right now, the very best high school program in the history of high school lacrosse, scholastic lacrosse, West Genesee High School in New York, won multiple state championships. The coach here, Mike Messier, ahead of his time, was the coach from the 70s, still probably within 10 years ago, he stopped coaching there. West Jenny was known for having amazing stick work. A lot of college coaches came from West Genesee High School. Jeff Tambroni at Penn State's a good example. Oh, I would hear from guys with how much stick work they would do. And I asked Coach Messier about the stick work, and he says, it's a really hard game if you can't pass and catch. And that was kind of his answer to it. You know what I mean? And I think, just making stick work important and making it that like in soccer, if you don't have foot skills, the soccer guys just say you're not good. Without foot skills, you're not good. Without stick work, you're not as good as you are if you have stick work. I think we have to find ways to make stick work important and not worry about other kids being bored with it. Well, what's more boring is and frustrating is throwing the ball away every 5 seconds because you don't have good stick work, right? So there's a lot of ways to make stick work fun and interesting, and sometimes it has to be done. I really do believe that's a little old school. I get a little old school every now and then, and focusing on stick work is important. There's a concept of is everyone doing everything in your practice or is there specificity? Here's an example. We're doing a 4-on-3 drill. The defensemen play defense and the offensive guys play offense. Or are we doing a drill where you make two teams that splits all your positions and everyone's doing everything, right? I think we have a little thing in lacrosse where the best players in every position are highly skilled and have high IQ. Whether you're a defenseman, a goalie, a faceoff guy, whatever it is, I lean towards trying everyone doing everything whenever we can. So I do think if you try and teach some specific nature of an action, maybe you want a certain group working against another group for purpose. And it may work better that way. If I'm trying to get a lot of touches in an unsettled drill, and I want the offensive guys to really work on getting touches and having finishing, putting poles in there playing offense might not be the best way to go about it. But if I really want the poles to become more skilled, it's a good way to work on is getting them more touches in those drills, right? So a lot of it depends on what your goal and what you're trying to get out of it is, and how what you're trying to accomplish. Part makes whole versus and whole makes part. Are we doing our drills as part of something? I know in the offensive presentation, there's a lot of talk about 4-on-4 offense. It leads into my next bullet point. I'm a huge fan of 4-on-4. I think 4-on-4 is way more valuable to most kids than 6-on-6. I mean, that's the hill I'll pretty much be willing to fight and die on. It's the value of 4-on-4 because I've done it a lot of 4-on-4 over the last few years. I think it's really valuable. It's actually better for kids than 6-on-6. The 4-on-4 eventually becomes part of 6-on-6 offense, right? Or 3-on-3 becomes part of 6-on-6. I know he demonstrated a 1-3-2 offense with those triangles, the old triangle offense in a 1-3-2. Are we playing 3-on-3 with 3 attackers or 3 defenders working on part of it while the middies are on that section of the field working on their 3-on-3 part of the offense? Are we doing part into whole? Some people believe in doing the whole thing and then breaking it down into the smaller groups. I think both things work. I don't mean to be a fence sitter and being a little Switzerland on that, but it all depends on what the skills of your players are and what you're trying to accomplish. And finally, I try to incorporate clearing and riding concepts, especially at the high school level. In every drill I do, there's a clearing component and there's a riding component. I think it's really important that you work on that clearing and riding, massive flips of possession. I'm a little tired of hearing about, I don't have great face-off guys, we can't win. You can, if you're playing with a shot clock, you certainly can get the ball back. But if you're not playing with a shot clock, clearing and riding can offset, poor face-off play a lot. I've seen it a lot. I think if you're clearing at a high percentage and riding at a percentage where you get the ball back, it offsets facing off. So I think these are skills you can work on all the time. I had a parent, out in California was saying that the field space we were training at, well, I don't see you doing a lot of clearing. Well, you're just not watching the, to his defense, he didn't understand the point of practice. And every drill we were doing some clearing. We don't need to put all 10 guys in the field to make the drill successful. Just moving on kind of quickly, now you have these drills that you really like, right? So now how do I make these? So now, coach, I have my core dozen drills I really like. How can I make the drills? How can I build on these drills rather than just having more drills? Well, one of my things that come up has been talked about a lot. The term constraints is a buzzword that we're using a lot nowadays. I think this has been going on for a really long time. I know Coach Skinner and I were texting about it the other night. I think a lot of people have been doing this for a long time, just not talking about it in these terms. I think really good coaches I've been with have been finding ways to make drills more complicated for decades. But just haven't talked about it in these specific terms. So a drill constraint, just so everyone understands, is a variation or change made to a drill to increase the variability of the reps, create communication, and encourage players to see and think about the game in a different way. And I use the term lacrosse IQ. That's what I look at as a drill constraint as. I'm not sure if that's the official definition. I know that's what I like. That's what I use it for. So drill constraints allow you to manipulate your drill without just simply adding another drill, right? So because the problem is learning the new drill is going to take several practices to build into it. Let's say we're practicing twice a week with a talent team, a youth team, and now we're going to add a new drill in. It could take a month before the kids really feel good about the drill and have some success in it. And meanwhile, you could have just taken the drill you already had and made it a little bit more complicated. Obviously, you have to be carefully used based on how old the players are. But I will tell you this. I learned a long time ago, and I was probably guilty of it for many years, but I wanted drills to look a certain way. I didn't want there to be a high level of failure in drills. I was guilty of wanting the drill to look like a clinic video. Hey, I want it to look really good all the time. I've come full circle that I think a really, no matter what team you're training, whether it's Syracuse University or fifth graders in a youth team in a town, I think you should have a good amount of failure in the drill because that means kids are trying to do things in the drill and it's not necessarily an easy drill. So my rule is 70%. If 70% of the drill looks pretty good and seems like it's being successful, we're probably in a pretty good spot there, right? I used to think like, oh, every rep had to be like picture perfect. Shame on me. I wish I could go back. I coached a whole bunch of guys. I apologize to those guys. I probably tried too much out of you, right? But now I want a pretty good rate of failure in the drill because it makes the drill more complicated and more involved and probably has some really good constraints in it, right? So when you're thinking about how you're changing the drills, these are the things that I kind of wrote down, and I'm going to go kind of quick and just focus on a couple of them more than others, are what size field are you playing on? Can we change the size of the field? How many players are in the drill? How are you starting the drill? How many repetitions does the drill have? And how many balls are you going to use? Like, is it going to be, hey guys, we're going to get 3 chances at this. We're going to get 1 chance at it. If you give a group of kids 1 chance sometimes, man, they're going to grip their sticks pretty tight because nobody wants to be out of the drill. The drill's fun. I want to be in the drill. But now I look and I'm playing with the kid who's the 8th attackman. I'm like, oh man, Johnny's going to throw that ball away. It's not a fun drill. But if I know I have more balls, maybe I'm going to play it a little bit differently. Are you using scoring systems? Coach Skinner the other day in practice had scoring systems going where they were giving points out and everything. I loved it. I didn't tell him that, but I love the scoring systems. I love keeping guys, aware. And I actually did it for multiple drills, having scoring systems, having points going through the course of practice, different teams. I thought that was pretty cool. Are there limits on what actions you let the kids do in the drill? I think this is an awesome constraint. I'm going to talk about it. And lastly, how long is a drill going to last? How long is a rep lasting? Are you putting a time limit? I saw in some of the drills Coach Skinner was doing, there was like a passing component, and they were going 3, 2, 1, putting pressure on the kids to move the ball. How many, and passing and shooting are some other constraints we'll get into in a minute. These are some examples of field constraints. You see the yellow areas are the areas we can play in. Well, you have your regular sized, hey, we're just going to play in the offensive box right now. It's a 5-on-4 drill. You can kind of go anywhere, right? Or am I making the field wider and a little narrower? What that's going to do is it's going to make north-south passing a little bit more complicated. It's going to reduce the amount of space north and south. It's going to make more room east and west. So now you make your offensive plays maybe carrying east and west because that's where the space is, and they have less room north and south. If you want that, if you're a dodging offense where you're trying to get to the middle of the field and you're running more east-west, it's a pretty good way to practice those avenues. If you're an alley dodging team going north and south, you probably want a little bit more room north and south as opposed to going east and west. Are you playing on half a field? This area over here, I call this the equator field, having half a field. Sometimes I give a little bit more space to finishing around the goal. I add a little bit more room over here. Can't really show up, but I add a little bit more area to kind of move into. Now you're obviously playing on this side of the field. This is the right side. This is the righty side, right? Kids are going to play with their sticks to the inside, pretty much playing right-handed. Lefties might have to play righty in here some of the time. If you flip to the other side, lefties are going to be more comfortable, and righties might be a little bit more uncomfortable and have to switch hands. Here's a top area of the field. We're not going to play below the goal line. We're just going to play in front of the goal. So that's going to change the parameters. That alone is going to change whatever drill you have. That's a constraint that's going to change how the kids play the drill and how it's approached and thought about. Player constraints. Are you going to add and subtract players from the drill? I'll give you an example. You start a drill as 2-on-2, 2 offensive guys and 2 defensive guys. The 2 like defenders with long sticks and 2 offensive players. If the offense scores a goal, they get an extra guy in the drill. Now it's 3-on-2. They feel pretty good about scoring, right? If the defense gets a stop, the goalie makes a save, the defense picked up the ground ball, they get to add a defender. And now all of a sudden the defensive guys have an advantage. And the offensive guys have to survive for, let's say, 10 seconds, 2 offensive guys versus 3 defenders. Pretty tough, right? They got to work. Offensive guys hate it. They're always giving you palms like, I have 1 less guy. Well, why does the defensive guys have to have 1 less guy all the time? Why do they have to be at disadvantage? Let the defensive guys play at the advantage for a little bit, right? Let them feel good about it. I'm a big fan of having the defensive guys feel good about what they're doing because so many drills, the defense is minus, right? Like they're always short a guy. So let's let them be plus the guy once in a while, Or we're going to start 6-on-6. If the defense wins the rep, the offensive guy comes out. Now it's 6 versus 5 offensive guys. If the offensive guys score, a defensive guy is out. They get to play the second ball, 6 versus 5, right? So adding and subtracting players, that alone changes everything in a drill. We're starting 6-on-6, but it's going to be 6-on-5 really quick. A support player. I'm a big fan of younger kids or all levels having a support player. That means there's a player at a spot in the field that you can throw the ball to if you're in trouble rather than just shooting a bad shot, right? And I'll show you an example of that in a couple seconds. A ghost player. A ghost player is a player that appears in the drill. You just add him in, and he plays, let's say, offense. So it's a 3-on-3 drill, and all of a sudden on the second ball, you add a ghost player. He appears, now it's 4-on-3. So now your mindset's going from, hey, we're 3-on-3, we're even, to now we have an extra player, and where does that player go? And what does he do in the drill? A restart player, interesting concept, right? Coach Skinner was doing an offensive drill the other day, and the defensive guys had a clear, but he made them pick up the ball where it went out of bounds, which I thought was awesome. And everyone's trying to cheat the drill and bring it in somewhere else, right? And he's like, no, it's got to go where it goes out, right? So now imagine you're playing 6-on-6 offense, and you have an extra couple players on the end line, let's say, offensive players with balls. And now the minute that ball went out of bounds, and you make the defensive and offensive guys chase that ball, the minute the ball goes out and you say it's offense, you blow the whistle, and one of the support players on the restart players enters the drill with the ball. And now the defensive guy's got to get back in. That original offensive guy might be out. He chased. He's out of the drill. But now you're starting quicker again, right? It's a quick restart drill. And now the defensive guys have to get dialed in. Maybe they got to bump and get reorganized. So restart players are pretty fun. Trust me, kids want to be restart guys. They love being the restart guy. It's a pretty cool advantage. The other thing with young kids is being the Red Baron or the ultimate quarterback is a player that just plays offense in the drill. Maybe you're doing a back and forth 3-on-3 drill, and now all of a sudden you have a player that just plays offense on both teams. He wears like a different color penny. Red Baron, he plays offense on both teams. Balls and repetitions. Are you going to play one ball in a drill? Or are you going to play multiple? You're going to play multiple balls in the drill. Are you playing one ball out? Like I said before, kids are going to be a little nervous playing one ball knowing they're out. If you give them 3 balls to play with in a drill, like one after the other, they'll be a little bit more free to be skilled and do more things in the drill. This is one of my favorite things. I talk about it every time I do a clinic talk, is a colored ball rule. I stole this from hockey, who uses colored pucks. So now you need 3 different kinds of balls. You need white balls, yellow balls, and orange balls. So possibly we're playing a 4-on-3 drill. Hey guys, with a white ball, do whatever you want. You play the drill out. If we throw a yellow ball in, we have to set an on-ball pick. We have to set an on-ball pick before we can go to the goal. So now even though it's a 4-on-3 drill, you're working on picking now, right? And what are you forcing the players in the drill to do? Is communicate. Yellow ball, yellow ball, yellow ball, set a pick, set a pick. They don't even know they're talking. and they're talking to each other, right? You're creating communication. And maybe in an orange ball, you say, hey, listen, guys, an orange ball, we got to make 3 passes before we can go to the goal. We have to throw a BTB. I know people are going to say, man, making kids throw a BTB. Yeah, why not? It's a skill. They can work on throwing a BTB. Might it go out of bounds a bunch? Sure. Have to throw a shovel pass or something, right? Adding a skill in there with a colored ball, getting guys to communicate. You'd be surprised when you're competing with 2 teams for points and maybe a little bit of conditioning, and a yellow ball comes in, and guys don't set a pick. The guys on the outside of the drill are like, hey, man, set a pick. That doesn't count. And you'd be surprised how much guys get on each other's cases, and forced communication is really, really good, but they wouldn't normally be doing without the colored ball. So I love colored ball rules. Having a scoring system. Put all of a sudden a scoring system in, and value the defense. How about defensive ground balls or takeaways or saves? So many drills, I go to practices and the goalie's just a prop. Run a practice without the goalies. How much fun would it be? It'd be no fun, right? Practicing without goalies is terrible. So now reward the goalies. Hey, if we're going to score 1 point for a goal, if a goalie makes a save, we're going to give a point to the defense. Make the goalies value, right? Make them be important in the drill. You'd be surprised how much the offensive guys now aren't just automatically taking bad shots anymore, either low angle shots, because they know they're going to get points up, right? Okay, and the scoring system allows the defense to win the drill. You have to engage. I really believe defensive players in why they're doing something to get better, not just being robotic. There's skills in there they have to work on. So now to engage them and know that they can win the drill, it's a really cool dynamic, right? It's a pretty cool concept. And it says here, value players, I said, who are, that's a mistake. That's my mistake. It's valuing players who are not the typical goal scorers, right? So now when you have ground balls and you have assists and saves, you have guys who play offense who in your whole season might score 2 goals. But what else can they bring to the table? Picking up a ground ball, like things like that. Value those other guys in drills that are pretty important. And obviously give the goalie some love, okay? Some action limits. This is really important, I think, guys. We all run drills, right? You're running a 6-on-6. You're running a drill. You're playing 6-on-6. Offensive players don't know what to do. What's the first thing an offensive player doesn't know what to do in a drill? What does he do? He or she. You know what they do most of the time? They set a pick. Why are they setting a pick? They don't know what else to do. Set a pick. Oh, why are we doing that for? Right? They don't really know. They're just doing something to just sort of occupy themselves. Well, what if you told them they had to do a whole drill where you could never pick? So now you're making guys shallow under, flex away, move with or without the ball, right? Sometimes you might want to say, hey, guys, in this rep, we're playing 4-on-4. First ball, no picking is allowed. You can't pick for the ball. Second ball, you're allowed 1 pick. Third ball, you have to screen away. You have to screen for a player off the ball. So now in 3 balls, there's 3 actions, and the players have to kind of figure out the drill and remember what to do, and you're allowing certain actions. If you tell guys, if you want to work on shallowing under and replacing and near man shallows under, far man replaces, take picking away. You see how fast in a 4-on-4 drill in a big space, how much that affects how guys move with or without the ball. It's really, really awesome, And a limit is, what can the defense do? Hey, in this drill, the defense can never switch. On a pick, you got to play through. No one can switch. Young kids, all they want to do is switch, right? Everyone's switching. Well, at a higher level, switching is not what we want, okay? And lastly, we just have a zip constraint, kind of like, I have to show you this. I don't really have a video for this. I'll send it to Blake, Coach Skinner. He'll send it out to you guys. Zip constraint is a really cool thing I just picked up at the IMLCA convention a few weeks ago. Time passing and shooting. How long is a drill lasting? How long is a ball going to last? You're going to let them play for as long as they want? Are you going to give them 10 seconds? Fast passing, what I saw Coach Skinner doing the other day, is an awesome way to do it. Giving the amount of time you can have the ball on your stick. And sometimes people run drills and they say, hey, we got to make 1 pass before we can shoot. Okay, I get where you want to get a pass in, but in a lacrosse game, when you're riding, you pick up a ball and it's a 2-on-1 to the goal, or a 1-on-none. Am I teaching kids are we shooting? Or are we making a pass? What are we doing here? So what's the value of making pass before you can shoot? I don't really use those constraints anymore. Some people still use them. I'm just not particularly a really big fan. I'm going to give you a couple examples. My last couple minutes here. I know I'm running out of time, right? Coach Skinner, how am I doing?
You're up
A
against
couple
it,
of
but
minutes.
you got plenty of time to finish.
I'm going to finish. So I'm going to give you an example right now. Here's a drill. I'm going to share this tab. I'm going to make it bigger if I can. Okay, this is a 3-on-2 drill. I call it the El Jefe drill. So basically what the point of the drill is, if we bring it back a little bit, it's a variation of West Jenny done in a half-field setting. So there are 3 offensive players and 2 defenders. It kind of mimics how we move off the ball and how we move without the ball in offense compared to with the ball. So we blow the whistle. The first offensive player runs down between the 2 defenders. See, the offensive player comes down and he sets himself in here. The ball is given to one side or the other. Here, the ball is given to this side. We put a pair of cones in here. These are the read cones. If the offensive player goes outside the read cone, the far player follows, and the crease player flexes away. So we're trying to create some rote offensive movement, teach guys how to move. And you can see here, he carries, throws back, and now we're in our 3-on-2 set, and then we get a finish, right? So you see on the rep, 2 more defenders comes in. First player comes down. The crease player fills. Ball comes to the outside. He flexes away. We follow. Throw here. A little too much carrying. Like to have that ball move a little quicker. These are like 7th graders, I believe, in this drill. And then we get a step down and a shot. Okay, so why do I put this drill in? Well, this very drill, there's a bunch of constraints you can add to the drill, right? If we use the colored ball, what we could do in the drill and the colored ball concept is we could now make you set a pick. So now we're going to throw and pick for the ball. That could be a concept that we could use in the drill. We could keep them in and play a second ball. We played 1 ball, stay in this, play a second ball. So there's a couple constraints that we could use. We could have a scoring system. If the defense gets an interception, they get 2 points. If the goalie makes a save, they get a point. So there's a pretty good drill. I call it El Jefe because the ball carrier is the boss. And you can see what's going on. There's a lot of constraints we can add to the drill to make it valuable. If I stop sharing it for a second and I go 1 more drill here, we'll go to this. See if I can get to it here. When we go to Dart. Are you seeing this one again now, or are you still on the other one?
We're
I'm not
looking
sure
at
what
you
I'm
right
on
now.
right now. Okay. Green. Boom.
There you go.
El Jefe. Sorry about that. I apologize. Once again, technology is not my friend. This one up. This one up. There we go. Good. Okay. There we go. So now we just did El Jefe drill. And now a variation that can work off El Jefe is a drill that I call dart drill. So in dart drill, we're starting with 2 defenders. The video is not the best. We're starting with 2 defenders, but there's still 3 offensive lines up top. So now we just ran El Jefe for about 8 minutes. And then, hey, guys, we're going to go from El Jefe to dart. So now dart drill starts with the balls with the goalie. 2 defenders banana to the sidelines. The goalie throws it one way. One of the offensive middies comes down, and we throw the ball there. So it becomes a querying drill. We throw there. We throw an over. There it is. We throw it right up. The defenders get in, and now we try to get from – now it looks like El Jefe again, right? But nobody got ahead. Nobody got ahead of the drill, and there's the goal, right? So what we did was we took El Jefe, and we used it rather than doing a whole different 3-on-2 drill and reteaching or moving the fields around or anything. All we did was go, hey, now we're in dart. So now we get some clearing concepts of the 2 defenders bananaing away. We clear the ball up, and then it becomes El Jefe on the way back, right? So we're finding a way to combining two drills in 15 minutes. We could do El Jefe into dart. We get some clearing in. And how would we change? How could we change El Jefe to be better? Dart to be better. Is what we could do is sometimes we add riders into the drill. So now as these offensive guys ride, then they clear, then they play offense again. You can see here, it just looks like El Jefe. What should probably happen here is this offensive guy, one offensive guy should be trying to get into the crease to mimic it, but we're working off the same concepts, right? We climb the hash, take a good shot right there. So those are two really good examples of drills that we would use, of that nature to be productive. And of course, last but not least, unfortunately for Coach Skinner, I could do this all day. Our last one is 8-6-4 passing. So this is like one of those engagement type drills I really like. You can see that, right? Where we have players on the inside and outside. And this is like this is one of those engagement drills that they're all doing in a merry-go-round fashion. It's the first time we ever did this with this group, so we have to change it a little bit and get out of the merry-go-round. But you hear them talking to each other. There's some communicating going on. There's more players than there are balls, so you can hear them communicating a little bit. You can see it that way. Okay, and I can see it here. How you can hear the communication going on. So this would be something that we'd be doing, let's say, in like our engagement period or whatever, to get guys talking to each other and things of that nature. So you can see how one thing plays into another through practice, right? So this is a topic I really am pretty passionate about. I can spend way more time on it. I don't want to move the clinic along a little bit, but and then if you have any questions, I'll take any questions in the last couple seconds. And obviously, I'd love to get back on and talk some more about it another time, or give you guys a chance to get on board and talk about some things related to practice. I think for women's, I work with women's coaches as well, women's player development, teaching as Lonsky coach at Rutgers, and we talk about the same things, practicing the same ways, even though the sport is a little bit different, So, and if I have any questions, Coach, see.